Hello, my name is Jim McGillivray and this is the Pipe Box, your source for all things piping. If you find this video useful, please give it a like and please subscribe to this YouTube channel to see more videos like this in future. I'd like to do a tune with you today. I'd like to do the tune Piobaireachd of Donald Dhu, which is a four-parted 6/8 march. The Piobaireachd of Donald Dhu is not actually a Pibroch. It's what used to be called a quick step. Pibroch, of course, is the classical music of the bagpipe. The melody for the Piobaireachd of Donald Dhu was taken directly from the ground of Black Donald's March. Black Donald's March was composed in the 15th century, and it's one of our oldest Pibrochs. It would appear the 6/8 march version has been around for some centuries as well. Walter Scott wrote words to it in the 1800s, and it would almost certainly have been played on pipes by this time. We see it published in Angus Mackay's Piper's Assistant in 1843, the first time the tune appears in staff notation. Suffice to say, it's one of our older pieces of late music. I've picked this tune partly for its popularity, but partly because of what we can learn from it. What you learn about Piobaireachd of Donald Dhu today will apply to almost every other 6/8 march you play. I'm going to play this tune in its entirety at the end of the video, but I will play each part individually as we go through the tune. Let's begin. Six-eight time. In 6/8 time, we have two major beats in each bar. Within each one of those beats, we have three smaller beats. This is the nature of compound time. There are 6/8 notes in each bar in 6/8 time. 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3. This is quite a pointed tune, and we can clap that time in a pointed fashion as well. As you can see, it's quite pointed, quite heavily expressed. In 6/8 time, and this is one of my major principles in 6/8 time, every time you see the dotted eighth note, followed by a 16th, followed by an 8th. You must hold that dotted eighth note quite long, and you must hold it consistently. For example, in that first line, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of those groups of 3 in a row. One of the keys in 6/8 time is to express all of those exactly the same way with a long initial note. If you get a little bit lazy and don't concentrate through one or two of those and round them out, the 6/8 effect is lost for a few bars. So always point these groups of 3. In bar 4, we see our first quarter note in this tune. We'll see more of them as we go. Quarter notes are very important when you express 6/8 marches. Pipers tend to be a little short on quarter notes. They're almost always followed by an eighth note in 6/8 time. And pipers tend to round these out. They play the eighth note a bit too long and the quarter note a bit too short. Anytime you encounter a quarter note in a 6/8, really push it out. We'll see in bar 7, it appears again. Quarter note starts the bar this time with a B strike on it. Long, long B there, and as we see, it's followed by the eighth note. Bar 8, we see the quarter note right at the almost end of the bar again. And again, we'll push it out and give that B lots of length. So here is bar 6, 7, and 8. long quarter notes, long dotted eighth notes. That's the first part. Let's move on to the second. Lots of strikes in that part. We haven't talked too much about technique in this tune yet. I'd like to do that now. I'm assuming for the purposes of this video that you know how to play doublings and grips and D throws. There are some points about these pieces of technique that we'll talk very briefly about. In part 2, we have doublings starting almost every single bar. Doublings need to be played very precisely on the beat, and if they're not, they'll bend the timing of the tune out of shape a little bit. Playing a doubling on the beat means that the G grace note is played on the beat. When the G grace note hits the chanter, your foot hits the floor. That's true for all doublings. You'll see more of this treatment of doublings in my book, Rhythmic Fingerwork, and there will be videos on this channel dealing with doublings specifically. But for now, try to keep the G grace note in the doubling on the beat. If you play with the doublings ahead of the beat, the tune will come out sounding a little bit like this. The tune will be a little bit ahead of the beat all the way through. So take good care with your doublings. G grace note on the beat all the time. The rest of this part conforms pretty much to what we talked about in the first part. Again, to start the second part, bar 9, 10, 11, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 groups of 3 dotted eighth notes followed by a 16th note. And again, these must be pointed all the time, not just some of it. One of the spots where I find they aren't pointed will be in the ending, bar 16 and 17. I've already asked you to hold on to the quarter note starting bar 16 in the ending. Make sure you hold the D in the following group of 3. Those 2 groups of 3 in the ending tend not to get held as well as the rest. And there's a very cute little second ending in the second part that you see in some settings of this tune and some you don't. That's part 2. Let's move on to part 3. When Angus Mackay published this tune in 1843 in his Piper's Assistant, this part, which we call the third, he called the fourth part. What we call the fourth, he called the third. In this part that we're doing now, which we're doing as the third part, he emphasized the bottom notes rather than the top notes around the grips, like this. This is Angus Mackay's arrangement. The one technical wrinkle that has been thrown into this part, instead of doublings and strikes that we've been playing in the first, second, and will play in the fourth part, now we're playing grips. In this part we play 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We play 8 grips twice through. We're playing 16 grips in this part alone. So you want to make sure your grips are clear, rippling, crisp, If you have trouble with grips or if you would like to improve them, there is a video on grips on this YouTube channel, and there is a treatment of grips in my rhythmic fingerwork technical tutor as well. So we won't spend too much time on grips today. What I would like you to do in this part is make sure that you push out the quarter notes after the grips, as we discussed earlier. Bree, 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 ba ba bree, bree, bee, dum bum bum. Really push out the quarter notes. In bar 19, we see our little group of 3 with a dotted 8th note at the start, and we see another one in bar 21. So rather than earlier in the part when we're seeing a lot of these groupings in a row, now we're seeing little isolated 3-note groupings. And these are the ones that it's easy to forget to point. So push out the quarter notes and don't neglect the dotted 8s, and you'll play this part just fine. Let's move on to the 4th part. Lots of E and F strikes in this part, and some folk will find that challenging. All I can say about them is to work on them in isolation. Don't just assume they'll get better the more you play the tune. Take E and F strikes, work on them separately. I have found that people tend to miss these strikes because there's a tendency to rush them somewhat. So we've been talking about holding the dotted 8th note to start each group of 3, and it's even more important here. If you don't hold that note right and you rush down to the strike, you have a good chance of missing it. So hold that dotted 8th before your E and F strikes. Everything else in this tune we've discussed. Let's hear the whole tune. That was the Piobaireachd of Donald Dhu, played on a Deger II Electronic Chanter. If you have any particular tunes or topics you'd like to see covered here on the Pipe Box, please send me an email, info@Pipetunes.ca. Until next time, I'm Jim McGillivray for the Pipe Box. Good piping.